Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Big Screen Bols podcast, where you have myself, Caleb Kendall, and the hero of Dothamir, Christian McCright.
Yes.
Welcome
Hi.
back to the podcast.
Welcome back. Today, if you did not get that reference, what are you doing here? Second of all, if you don't know that
please come
reference
back.
and you're
Please
still
come back.
here, I say please, thank you. We're talking about something Star Wars related, and if you look at the title at all, you'll know it's about the new Ahsoka TV show that released on Disney Plus. It came out like a little while ago, and so apologies for being a little late on it, but we wanted to make sure we kind of took time to actually watch it and sit down and gather up some of our short thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So
Because this was kind of long. We had 8 episodes in total, about an hour apiece.
they were like 45 minutes. Like this was like a TV show.
Yeah.
Because like nowadays, like TV shows are getting so long, and a lot of Disney shows, even like The Mandalorian, there'd be some episodes that are like 29 minutes and like 32. These ones were like minimum like 42, 43.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how TV shows have changed a little bit just because of the streaming services that are out there. Like beforehand, they had to block them off to be like 20-something minutes per episode just so they could fit within satellite TV and mainstream TV's kind of block scheduling.
Oh yeah.
But now, since all of that's kind of changed, it's like, we'll make this episode as long as we want to make it now. And people are able to be more kind of free with their ideas, in my opinion. They're able to do that.
And all these new TV shows, I mean, because Disney Plus is releasing so many per year now, that there's always something new coming out left and right. A large complaint has been that some of the quality of these shows, be it for whatever universe, is kind of going in and out like a roller coaster. But good news, the Ahsoka TV show, in my opinion, because we have not talked about this beforehand.
Yeah, this is our hot takes. It's like when we got into this podcast room, we sat down, made sure the camera angle looks good, make sure I got my good side in here. And after that, I just clicked the record button.
And we just go. Like, most of this is improvisation. There's a lot of people who use like a lot of scripts for their stuff. We do not.
Yep.
So,
And it might make our podcast a little bit worse, but it makes it that much more fun.
it's fun. It's a lot more freeing to like convey your thoughts instead of just like, oh, well, I need to talk about this and this and this, but I don't have time to talk about this and this and this. It's more of like, what do you feel in the moment and like what's appropriate for the time? And speaking of appropriate for the time, we will try to keep this at a decent pace. But as I was saying, in my opinion, this is a pretty good show.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this.
And I want to say as well, too, just real quick for everybody that was a little bit confused by the show as well, too. I'm going to go through a little bit of history of Ahsoka Tano,
Sure.
which the show was about. So Ahsoka was released in 2008 in the hit TV series Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The idea was that she was a 14-year-old Padawan that was kind of placed into the care of Anakin Skywalker. Master Anakin Skywalker. Oh, wait.
He ain't no master.
He ain't no master.
That's right. Pull up the clip. It's a good meme.
Yeah. But he was kind of given this, and George Lucas had kind of stated beforehand in a few interviews of the purpose of creating Ahsoka. One, it was to kind of give some more life and color to the Jedi Order, because, as you know, Ahsoka isn't human. She's actually a Tengaruda, from the planet of Tengaru.
Yeah.
Tengaruda. So they kind of wanted to bring some more of that alien feel to Star Wars. One. Number two, it was to actually kind of be as a plot device for Anakin to actually learn responsibility later through the series, to really evolve him from him being an apprentice in Star Wars 2 versus kind of being this whole completely different figure in the third Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith movie.
And all of that really makes its like reappearance in this show, because through there's like 7 seasons in Star Wars, the Clone Wars, and if you haven't seen those, go watch those. The first few
Yep.
are a little rough around the edges because it was kind of newer at the time.
Well, that
But when you
was
really get into it, like the lore behind I will forever say, because I mean, a lot of people love like Lord of the Rings, like Middle Earth, Star Trek, whatever. I personally think that the scope of the universe of Star Wars is there's so much detail in it that I think that it outscopes things like Middle Earth and Star Trek and things like that. I think Star Wars has the most interesting lore of any universe ever. Like that includes like Marvel and DC. Like I think Star Wars has the most interesting universe, the most interesting concepts and characters. And definitely like seeing that again through this show and through all those 7 seasons, you really get the stuff like behind the scenes of like who Anakin is and how Ahsoka helped his characterization.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd agree with the statement of it being that, but I think that's a different discussion for a different day that we can always dive into.
Fair enough.
And lastly, and this is what I really respect about George Lucas, just because I'm kind of a business-minded individual. Another big reason he made Ahsoka was at the time he had 2 daughters, and he really wanted to portray to more of a young female audience as well too, which Ahsoka was able to appeal to as well, to bring more females into it, to see a kind of that hero type compared to the Leias and all of that seemed to be more of the damsel in distress type role.
Diversity.
Diversity. And then just, I don't know, George Lucas, like when you mentioned this whole lore stuff, like he never meant for it to be that way.
No.
Again, at the end of the day too, he really thought Indiana Jones was going to be better than Star Wars.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Indiana Jones is awesome, but
Like, come on, it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's just like, that was never the goal and the attention. And then it's like, how many of these things were changed to be like on the spot? Like, I'll never forget watching an interview with him talking about Luke's lightsaber being green. It's like, well, the only reason we made it green was if we made it blue, it was going to match the.
It was going to blend into the background.
It was going to blend into the background when he's fighting outside, and
which I think is so funny. But then they take that, and he makes like a whole like lore, like a whole background about the different colors of lightsabers.
Yeah.
And it really sparked during like the Republic era, like with Anakin. Like then that really became prominent. But at the time, it was just some stupid. I mean, some like not stupid. I don't want to say stupid. Some like practical reason just for filmmaking that spiraled down to. You can use these things for incredible lore.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things I respect about George Lucas is just how he's able to pivot on a dime like he does and give us that juicy lore for just to be adaptive to what's happening at the time.
Dude, he's always got that oop ready. Like he's at the ready. He's always taking left turns when you think he's going to go right.
He's going up when you think he's going to crawl.
Yeah. But he ain't going backwards like Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah. But other than that, that's kind of all the history and stuff. I think it's about time we get into the show here. Let's kind of wrap this show up. Again, Ahsoka, 8 episodes, average 45 minutes. Pretty quick, easy watch. Jump to the Disney Plus and find out what you need. Yeah,
it starts out kind of slow. When I watched like the first, was it probably 2 or 3 episodes, I was like, this is good. This is solid. It ain't no Mandalorian, but this is solid. And then from that point on, like it really starts, like it escalates so quickly. It brings in, it's a continuation basically of Star Wars Rebels, which I've seen the majority of it, not like all of it in its entirety. I didn't like binge watch it. I watched it like kind of piece by piece. So my knowledge on Rebels is a little bit more limited, but it references a lot of the characters, and definitely one of the big ones in here is obviously Ahsoka and Sabine Wren, who is a Mandalorian who also has Ezra's lightsaber, and she kind of wants to go find him ever since he kind of went into like this space wormhole with Admiral Thrawn. And that's like what the whole plot is kind of centered around, is like Ahsoka like unraveling this mystery while Sabine is trying to find Ezra. And then there's, a couple of these other characters that are kind of are along for the ride or on the other side, on the evil side. And they do a really good job of giving all these characters something to do. So, although I will admit, I feel like Ahsoka, like as far as like the plot standard, has a little bit less to do with everything than everybody else. And that I think is one of the biggest weaknesses of the show, but that's just me.
Yeah, and I'll be honest as well too. Christian, you said you liked it. Is it the worst Star Wars TV series they made? No,
No.
I'm not going to say that. Is it the best? I think it's pretty far from that. I think this is actually, in my opinion, the worst written Star Wars series that's out there.
Really?
Just because of just all of the open, how the plots was kind of weird. A few of it was dropped off. Because, and again, the opening scene was pretty sweet. I'll say that.
Yeah.
This is like my just hot take of this whole entire deal. Just, let's start it out early just to give you guys these good nuggets of information.
Those good nugs.
Yeah. If you want to see Star Wars action, this is your place. This is where you'll find this.
For sure.
If you want to watch character development and really get involved and deep dive and for them solving their problems and you get really interested in seeing that, this is not your place.
It is not it.
This has a lot of cool lightsaber fighting scenes, a lot of cool scenes like that. But other than that, that's kind of that's the strong suit of this whole entire series.
I feel like this is more of a setup. Like, because apparently there's going to be like a movie released in theaters where like all these franchises like The Mandalorian and Boba Fett and Ahsoka are like all going to like conglomerate and culminate into like this big event. I'm assuming against Thrawn and his new set of like night troopers or dark troopers, whatever he has, and Moff Gideon probably. And so with all that going on, I feel like this is a lot of setup. And if you're looking for like this really good, like, oh, this is character oriented, it's not necessarily that. It's like, here is object A and here is goal A, and here's how we use object A to get to goal A. And then, past that, then there's goal B and object B. It's direct, but it tries to throw plot points in there that don't always get resolved.
And I think they really introduced too many characters in this, in my opinion, because like the whole like general rebel leader or whatever, I can't remember her name right now. The one with the tentacles type.
With the tentacles. I'm blanking. I'm blanking right now.
That's the reason.
Person.
That's the reason I forgot about it, was that she was in a few episodes and it just really felt like it was wasted. Like, did she really do anything for the plot at the end of the day?
Probably not.
Like very, very little. Like super, super little. Like microscopic of what she was able to do for it. And it was still made as a big deal of, Thrawn's coming. We need to spend resources of the Republic.
Hera.
Hera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kanan Jarrus's lover or whatever. Yeah. The one rebel. The Twi'lek. Got it. Boom.
Twi'lek,
Star Wars. We know Star Wars. That's right. First try.
But either way, I just don't feel like they did a lot for the plot. And it's like the last episode was okay just because it didn't have any of those other people within it. And it was able to shine. It was able to do great.
Hera serves as like a Paul Revere, like in this show. Like she's just basically there to say like, oh, like Thrawn will return. And everyone's like, you sure about that? And you know, she ends up being right. And like they like to like tease images of like Chopper, the R2 unit. He really doesn't do anything. I mean, in the show, he's like really funny and he's an iconic character. He's kind of pushed aside in this, but I'll tell you where. I will tell you where the show really hits its marks. The Dark Jedi, the Gray Jedi, the because they're not Sith, they're not Jedi. We don't really know what they are. But
their lightsabers are red, so we know they're bad.
It's like red or like blood orange, and it's Balon's skull and Shin, I think is his apprentice's name. They are super cool. The mystery behind them, and especially behind Balon's skull, is really intriguing. And their lines of dialogue immediately draw you in. Every time they're on the scene, it's like, oh, I like this show. This show's cool. And then when they're off camera, you're like, Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, well, it's as well too. Like they do a really really good job of um, like when he's like having scenes fighting Ahsoka at that point. It's like, hey, I left the Jedi Order and you left the Jedi Order. We're the same in a lot of ways. Like, and
Yeah.
that really brings it in. It's like, because the Jedi was an awful group of people as well too, which it would cut back to, and it's not really shown too much in this series, but how the Republic basically annihilated the planet of Mandalore
Mm.
at the time because of the civil war that was going on, the major conflict, and Ahsoka was there and kind of led a lot of the charge as well too to do that, and that's what really separated her from the Republic, where she wanted to leave the Jedi Order, and that really hurt Anakin as well too, and was possibly a reason of why he went to the dark side.
Yes. And like in their lines of dialogue, which is so fascinating. Um, Sorry, I had to make sure that I was going to pronounce his name correctly because I did not want to say this without making sure that that I said it correctly. R.I.P. to Ray Stevenson. He played a very minor role in the Thor franchise. In the first two movies, he was like one of his like Asgardian friends, and in the third movie, he just gets offed. He is really freaking good as Balon Skull.
Yep.
Every move he makes, every line he says is so darn interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and his goal, because through all this, by the way, spoiler alerts, like for this, I'm gonna say like light spoilers, because I don't want to get into like the super detailed parts, because I feel like if you like Star Wars, you should watch this for yourself.
Yep.
His goal has a lot to do more with like the Force as a concept and like the Force as an entity and his pursuit of something to do with it, rather than, oh, he's just here to like mess around, or he's a mercenary, or he's here to help the Empire. He clearly uses the Empire for his own gains, or the new upcoming Empire.
Yep.
Because he's accompanied by Morgan Elsbeth, who's like this aspiring like witch of Dathomir sort of lady, and she wants to find Thrawn. She wants to team up and do all this magic stuff, and Balon is like clearly using that for other means, and it sets that up near the end of the show where you want to see more, because it harkens back to the Clone Wars TV series, and it harkens back to, in my opinion, the greatest episodes in the entirety of the Star Wars Clone Wars, aside from season 7 that takes place in Revenge of the Sith. And seeing all that, super, super cool. And a lot of the powers, a lot of the abilities, a lot of the mysteries are set up really well. But like, as we said earlier, if you're looking for something where it's like, oh, well, I want to have like a deep dive into Ahsoka's character, you get like one episode of that. And that's maybe two, because she's like trying to figure out how she's going to be able to train Sabine Wren to be a Jedi. Like, she's tried before and then she has to try again. And then learning kind of how to deal with herself and her own emotions and responsibilities. That's pretty much all you get out of it, but it's not like this super deep, like profound character dive for her.
Yep. No, I agree, but I just gotta say, like, the action scenes in this were really, really cool.
They're super
like, I can't go into all of them because there's just so many like really cool action scenes,
and the choreography is insane.
Yeah, no, they did a good job with all of that, I think. But whoever wrote it though was just like, I don't know. It might have felt like it's more like who might have been the director's fault as well too. They might have had more set up into the story, but it might have been like Michael Bay type director that was like more action, more cutting, more
shake the camera, shake it. It definitely feels like, it almost feels as if they were like, okay, we want this fight scene, and this fight scene. So how do we fill in those gaps?
And we can't, and we got to cut it down to 8 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I don't know what it is with TV shows nowadays that are cutting down to like, oh, like this is only 6 episodes or 8 episodes. I'm like, most TV shows that we grew up with, I mean, other than cartoons, they would go by like a 10 episode like per season. That was kind of the normal. And I feel like that should be a thing again, because I feel like you can cut down a few minutes off each episode and extend it a couple episodes more, explain things better, thread plots, have those times where you slow down. Because after episode 3 or 4 in this show, it just doesn't, you have no chance to breathe. It just immediately is like, okay, like on to the next, like 5 minutes of downtime before the next action scene.
Yeah.
And that can be a little bit jarring, but it's still cool.
Yeah. No, for sure. But I just like, you look at like Ahsoka and you look at, I was watching it side by side with another TV show that's on Amazon Prime exclusive called Generation V, which again, this is a very different age group type of show. And that might be where this is getting into issues on my end, but you see how the writing is completely different depending on the two. And one, on the Generation V side, it's so raunchy. Again, I don't want to watch it half the time.
That's fair.
But it's actually good writing. The little stuff that is in there, it's like, wow, this is really, really good writing compared to Ahsoka, where in my mind, it's like, we're not even going to try here. Like the character is just what it is, and we're just going to throw this out there. And hopefully you watched all of the Clone Wars, and hopefully you watched all of Star Wars Rebels, so you can keep along and follow along with the whole entire process. Because I am somebody that has not watched Star Wars Rebels all the way through. I've only watched probably a few episodes into it. And like, this is where it's going to
lost.
Yeah, it's where it's getting a struggle. And again, you don't have to watch that to enjoy this, because they put so much emphasis on the action scenes. But I'm kind of getting sick and tired of like, oh, you have to watch every single piece of content we've ever put out to understand what's coming out for the future.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a great idea going forward. And I know Disney did a great job with it in like the Avenger franchise, but trying to do it in Star Wars, there's just so much more content out there that we need to keep up with. You can't expect anybody to follow along and be able to keep up with all that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a struggle because now we live in a world where like consumption of media is not only normal, but it's encouraged.
Yep.
And because of that, like, it's like, oh, well, here's a super cool thing that comes out, but you have to watch like 20 hours of this stuff beforehand. And it's like, you're asking a lot out of people, especially if you want to get more people into it, because if you're just relying on your target audience, that's going to fade away at some time. You're going to have to find a way to bring in new audience. And in a later episode, we're going to get into a couple problems with things with target audiences. But let's acknowledge the elephant in the room, because I feel like this is the last thing that we should definitely talk about before we end this episode. Let's talk about the episode where, full spoilers for this episode, where Anakin Skywalker comes into the mix, like officially. His scenes were the best scenes in this entire show, bar none. In my opinion, maybe not yours. In my opinion, everything with Anakin fits really perfectly. The dialogue is well written, and it feels reminiscent of not only the Clone Wars, but also the original prequel movies as well. And it does bring in some characterization for Ahsoka, but also it just feels good to see Hayden Christensen, who got so much crap for being Anakin when the prequels came out, and now people love him, and they should, because he's great. He's absolutely great, and whenever I see him, I'm like, yeah, that's Anakin Skywalker. That at first, watching the prequels and then watching the Clone Wars, I'm like, now the Clone Wars, Anakin seems more like Anakin to me. But now, like, they finally kind of started to mesh it together, and I'm like, this works super well.
Yeah.
Holy cow. I'm like, Hayden, and I saw behind the set photos or videos where Hayden's actually talking to Dave Filoni, the man himself, about how a certain scene should be choreographed and dialogued, which is because, and it works out so well in the episode or two where he's very, in the main episode where he's prominent in this show, is by and large the best episode, and by and large has the best characterization, the best dialogue, and the best action scenes all in one. It is, on an episode standpoint, in my opinion, it's like a 9 out of 10. But the whole show as a whole is like a solid 7.
Yeah.
Like, it's not disappointing. It's not profound either. There's some really cool stuff in there, but it does get bogged down by all these extra stuff
Yep. And as well too, Christian's going to give it a 7. I'm going to give it a 6.2 because, like he did say, and I will agree to that, the episodes where they did have Hayden Christensen coming back as Anakin, and the scenes where you had kind of the actual real antagonist, what in my opinion should have been the real antagonists in it, those were the gold of this, other than just the cool action scenes and kind of the cool armor schemes that was brought in and the cool magic that was done by the witches.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it's kind of struggled a little bit. It didn't really know what it wanted to be. I'm going to give it a 6.2.
What did you think about the scenes like with Anakin Skywalker? Like it's like this bridge between like life and death, sort of. I don't really know how to explain it. It's like this like little force. That's too broad. I really don't know how to explain it. It's like this weird purgatory between life and death.
It's an energy bridge from Halo.
Yeah. It's Rainbow Road from Mario Kart. Yeah. What did you think about like that episode, like in particular?
Well, I just like the idea was that it was trying to teach Ahsoka a lesson the whole entire time. Mm-hmm. And you get to see a little bit of her background. You get to go back to Mandalore when she was fighting. You get to go back to one of her first engagements. Was it on Geonosis?
Yeah, something like that.
And this whole entire time, it's him trying to say something to her about what's going on, and she's kind of continuing to stand up, and then they go to the bridge where they're fighting because she's kind of disobeying Anakin, what he's saying, what he's trying to teach at the time, and it's like, go on, I'm not giving up.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, you passed, and actually like beats him in the fight, and
yeah, it's like you have to fight for your life, and then he's also trying to teach her a little bit about the burden of responsibility and war and how that coincides, and like you can't just run away from your problems, because Ahsoka has this weird thing where like she's, ever since she left the Jedi Order, she's kind of run in and out of her problems. She's not very consistent with whether she wants to stay or wants to be outside of it. And he's like, no, like you need to get into it, because this is the world we live in. This is what happens. This is what you signed up for. And it's not necessarily that he's saying like, oh, you have to be a Jedi again, because he clearly shows his dark side. Like he gets the red lightsaber and everything. There's like the flashes where he becomes like Darth Vader for like half a second. Yeah. And it's more or less like he is trying to force her like out of her comfort zone. Yep. And I think that's super important, because Anakin had to go through that. And he's like, look, I had to do this too. This kind of sucks, but taking on this responsibility that you may not want to take on is actually better for you than for if you were to run away.
And then you have to go into the fact as well too, that like she has a lot of burden kind of on her as well too, or not burden, but really kind of the feelings of remorse for absolutely destroying Mandalore. And she has to teach a Mandalorian how to be a Jedi.
Yeah.
Like,
and a stubborn Mandalorian, like who is very like freelance, and that could be extremely frustrating.
Oh yeah, and extremely hard to teach the Force to somebody that's very wanting to live life their own way.
Yeah, and who's very inadept with the Force. Like she's like throughout most of the show, she's not very good at using the Force like at all until like later, and that really frustrates her, even though she tries to encourage her like, hey, stay with it, stick with it. Their personalities are actually more similar, which actually causes them to clash a bit.
Yeah.
And so I like seeing Anakin come back in that role as like officially like a Force ghost to help her, and to be like, you know, I'm your training isn't done. You're never too old to learn. And I think that just those lines of dialogue are just so well crafted that it makes me wonder, why can't the other episodes be as well crafted as that one?
Even after this episode as well, too, again, you never see Ahsoka basically after the episode, except very briefly for fighting scenes. But when she does get to say stuff after that moment, they're actually kind of nice.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry about your lightsaber. Your lightsaber's not the most strongest thing you have.
Yeah.
But man, I just think this whole entire time, like all these little plot holes and stuff, and I'm going to go and just name 3 real quick here. 1, you have one episode where they get to this planet. Do they ever name what that planet's name? Like what they call the planet?
I can't remember.
Or the whales bring them in, but
Yeah, space whales.
yeah, you get one scene where it's like, I don't believe in using a lightsaber anymore. I have my own powers. And in the last episode, he's crafting a lightsaber to fight with.
Yeah, he's like, I'm in tune with the Force. I can just do this now. And then he's like, yeah, but having a lightsaber is kind of nice though. So
you get that. You get the Dothamir lady.
Morgan Elsbeth.
Morgan, yeah, that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say. Morgan. She's an excellent swords fighter, martial artist.
She's able to like keep pace with like these like top tier iconic fighters with just like a sword. I don't know. Maybe magic has something to do with it, but like I feel like that's kind of a cop out. I feel like it should be like oh well, I can blast you from a range or like summon these things to fight you, but like she can literally fight hand to hand with these people. And I'm like, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
You sure about that?
I was like, I'm tired of this, Grandpa. There's no way that everybody can just be an ultimate fighter anyway. Like, she's a witch. She has magical abilities. She spent her whole entire life trying to harness magic. Make that her thing. Somebody like a Mandalorian, like from the series The Mandalorian, yes, he's an amazing fighter. Why? Because he was bred with the instincts and trained his whole entire life to fight.
And she didn't.
Yeah, she didn't. So you have a warrior class race of people
And a mage class.
and a mage class of people. The mage class doesn't automatically have the abilities of the warrior class, as well as the warriors don't have the abilities of the mage class.
And she has like no armor. She literally is like wearing like these robes. So whatever, but that's a whole other thing. Anyways, your other two plot holes or one last plot hole?
Yeah, one last plot hole here.
Yep.
Again, the greatest two antagonists of the whole entire series is just left out for the last episode.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like,
They have nothing.
This is the
basically.
Thrawn show now. And it cuts to Thrawn and they like really, really want him to say like cool, meticulous things. And he doesn't really need to say anything profound.
Like he's just kind of cold and calculated, but you kind of expect that. But now they leave Baylan Skull like they actually show him doing something super interesting. Where if you recognize it from the show, it's like a huge reveal. But like his apprentice just F's off somewhere, and is like the leader of this gang of people or something. I don't understand. So
yeah, and I don't know how they accepted it as well too. Just like, oh yeah,
person has a glowy sword. Let's follow this person,
yeah.
regardless of whatever they say.
Don't cut me, please.
So yeah,
that's what I gotta say. I'm gonna complain more than I will praise this thing for, but the action scenes though, pretty nice.
I mean, it's like the high ceiling, low floor kind of thing, where it's like the first couple episodes, I'm like, okay, like this is dragging, like this has been hyped up for quite a while, and it's starting to go off a little slow. But then it does escalate, and then it kind of de-escalates again, and it just is. It is what it is. But it's inoffensive. It's harmless. It has some great stuff, some not so great stuff. I feel like we've been saying that a lot nowadays.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that are just very mid, and maybe that's because our expectations are like up here now. But it's like, ask like Martin Scorsese, Christopher Nolan. Just because you make a lot of content doesn't mean that you should be pushing out a lot of mid content. They have a lot of movies, and all their movies are good. So figure it out.
Figured out.
We believe in you.
But other than that, I think that's going to conclude the podcast here. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, and make sure to comment as well too. We want to hear you guys' thoughts on all these things we're doing for the future. Because we're doing these draft days, we're doing these reviews. We really want to know what content you guys want to see the most, so we can make sure to mold ourselves to be what you as the audience wants to see. Because that's why we're doing it. At the end of the day, is
to adapt to your will.
We will be good writers of content.
That's right.
Hopefully. But other than that, peace out.